Okay, the second part of the notes here. So after you have studied for the English test, it's possible then you would want to study for the next part, which is the civics test. So if you go over here to study materials for the civics test and click on it, it will take you to this page right here. So basically, the civics test, there are 100 questions, and all 100 questions are on this page. Like, this is the study guide for the test. And it even has some answers that will go with each question. And it will be an oral question, like you'll be interviewed by an immigration officer, and they will ask you 10 questions off of this list. And you have to get 6 out of 10 correctly in order to pass the civics portion. So basically, here's the 100 questions. They'll give you 10 of them, and you have to get 6 right. So questions like, the idea of self-government is in the first 3 words of the Constitution. What are those words? You should know the Constitution starts with "we the people." Oftentimes, I will do this as a class activity, and some of my students might not know 6 out of these 10 questions. What is the economic system in the United States? Well, it's a capitalist system, is what you're going for there. How many years does the U.S. senator serve? I mean, a lot of these things are government class type things. Who's the president of the United States? Who's the chief justice of the United States? So hopefully you'd be able to get 6 out of 10 of these right. But that is where you would go to study here for the civics part. So you have to pass your English interview where you follow directions and they'll ask you some questions, and then you have to pass the civics portion as well. All right. Do people ever lose their citizenship? That's the next question here. And the correct answer is yes, but only usually by choice. Not only usually, only by choice, or if they can prove that you did something wrong when you became a citizen. Let me explain that here in a second. So, losing your citizenship is called expatriation. Expatriation, and you should see the word patriot on there. It's not quite spelled as a patriot is spelled, but it's the right idea. Expatriation is the act of losing your citizenship. And the way to lose your citizenship, the most common way is to lose it voluntarily. It means you've chosen to move to another country and you no longer want to be a citizen of the United States. Okay? Citizenship cannot be involuntarily removed. That means if you are a citizen, no matter how bad of a crime you commit, they cannot take your citizenship away from you. Okay? Even if you commit, treason or you do something against the United States government, they cannot, if you're a US citizen, they cannot take away your citizenship. Okay? The only way you can lose your citizenship is through what's called denaturalization, and that is if they found out that you lied on your application or you somehow, I don't know, cheated on your civics test, which I guess it'd be possible somehow. But while you were going through the process, somehow they found out that you have lied or committed fraud in the process of becoming a citizen, then you can lose your citizenship. But no matter how bad of a crime you commit, you cannot be left out. One thing I wanted to point out is that marriage is not an automatic way to become a citizen. There's been probably countless sitcoms, movies, TV series where you have a character who gets married or has to marry somebody to stay in the country. At least I can think of 5 of them right now. That is not an automatic way to gain citizenship, but it does shorten the time requirement. Remember, if you're married to an American, you only have to have lived here 3 years before you can apply to be a citizen. If you're not married, you have to wait 5 years. There are probably some things with green cards, like if you have a green card and you're married to an American, you can maybe get a time extension of how long you stay in the country. But marrying an American citizen does not automatically make you a citizen. All right. Shifting over a little bit now to immigration. Um, in general, the United States has kind of changed its opinion on immigration. Before the 1880s, we had a general policy of welcoming all immigrants. After the 1880s, we've became kind of a country where we didn't want as many immigrants. And I want you to think for just a little bit about why the change. Why was there a change before the 18 or after the 1880s from the United States' opinion? Well, a correct answer for the difference is that early in the early history of the United States, before the 1880s, we had tons of space. Our country was expanding rapidly, and we needed people to fill the space and do all the jobs and all the work that needed to be done. We needed the roads to be built, and the forests to be cleared, and the farms to be settled, and natural population growth by birth wasn't nearly fast enough to fill in and get all the jobs done that needed to be done. Plus, the people coming in the early 18 before the 1880s were from Northern and Western Europe. So you've got British people and German people and French people and people who looked and sounded like and acted like the people who are already here. Okay. After the 1880s, more and more different countries started to immigrate to the United States, and they had a lot less in common with the original inhabitants of the European settlers here. So the southern, the Italians and the Polish people, and then the Irish people. I mean, there were just different groups and different religions, and then Chinese people, and there was the different racial barriers came to play, but also the fact that the labor shortage was over by the 1800s, and we've started to get machines doing some of the jobs. And in general, the United States didn't need quite the numbers that they once had. So they started passing some laws that changed immigration policy. So the earliest one was the Chinese Exclusion Act that barred all Chinese people from coming to the United States. Period. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Chinese exclusion excluded the Chinese. And then the Immigration Acts of the 1920s, that started what's called the quota system. A quota, a quota is a limit or a certain amount of something. Think of the quote here, right? Like you can get an auto insurance quote or quotient, right, as a math term. So a quota is a limit. It's an amount you have to, a certain amount that you can get to. So these immigration acts started putting what's called quotas on immigrants. And I'm going to actually skip down to the National Origins Act of 1929. So basically, that put a quota on the number of immigrants that could come in from certain countries. So they looked at the 1880 census. Now, this is 1929. So they went back almost 50 years. Oops, sorry. They went back almost 50 years to look at the census. And then they said, all right, we're going to only allow a certain percent of the people that were coming in 1880. So in 1880, most of the people were still from Northern and Western Europe, so they got the preferential treatment. If there were only if only 5% of the immigrants were from Poland, for example, they were only going to allow a smaller number of those people because they weren't coming in big waves in 1880. So they put a quota on where people could be from when they were coming into the United States. That's what the National Origins Act, where you're from, where you originated from. Okay? And we had quotas all the way up until the 1965. And then they took the country quota out and said, we're just going to allow a total of 270,000 people. Doesn't matter what country you're from, but you're only going to get 270,000. All right. Today, who can actually legally come to the United States today? The most recent immigration act we have is from 1990, which used to not seem like that long ago, but to all of you that were not born then, that was, forever ago as far as you can tell. That's why you might hear in the news a lot that we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to fix our immigration system? Well, because we really haven't passed much since 1990 on immigration. So yes, that there is some truth to that. All right, today we allow 675,000 total people into the United States. There are no, again, still no quotas on what countries people can be from. Of those 675,000 each year, 1/3 have to have relatives here. They have to be related to citizens. So if you have family here, you get preferential treatment because you can fill into that 1/3. Who else gets preferential treatment? Highly trained researchers, engineers, scientists, doctors, those type of people. People who are in short supply of the United States. If you've ever, I don't know, noticed that there are people that are like doctors. There's a lot of top researchers and doctors that are now from India or Pakistan or some places like that. That's because we don't have a ton of Americans going into those fields. So we welcome those immigrants, and they kind of get on a fast track to becoming to getting their green card to be over here working. We do not allow legally entrance. We do not allow the legal entrance of criminals, terrorists, people with communicable diseases, drug abusers or addicts, illiterates, people who are not educated, or people with mental handicaps. Those are barred from getting their green card, even to come here temporarily. And remember, that's the first step. You want to be a citizen, you first have to come here legally. And again, we haven't worked on it really. We haven't got a lot done on immigration since 1990. I'm going to skip that. The last part I want to talk about is undocumented immigrants, or illegal aliens as they're called. An alien is somebody who's from outside the United States. So they estimate that about 12 million live in the United States right now. They can be deported. Contrary maybe to what people believe, the United States does deport a lot of immigrants, and actually Democratic President Obama deported more than any other president in recent history. So there have been a lot of deportations lately. And I've also heard in the news most recently that with Trump's more tough stance, rhetoric anyway, his words that he's used against immigration, there have actually been fewer border crossings illegally. Fewer people are getting picked up by the immigration services today in the last several months since Trump has been president than ever before. So deportation has been upheld by the courts. It is legal to deport an illegal immigrant, but it is a civil crime, not a criminal act. So you can deny bail to those people, and you can just ship them back. So just keep that in mind. That is an issue. Last thing, then, what are some positives and negatives about undocumented immigrants? A lot of people skip right down to the negatives. They worry about overpopulation. They're talking about me at Walmart. I can't understand what they're saying. They do use public services. Their kids go to American schools. They use libraries. I mean, the class sizes get bigger. You have to hire more teachers, that sort of thing. In some cases, they can avoid paying taxes, especially with certain types of jobs that they're doing. They are worried. The well-documented minority group that are drug dealers or whatever, there is some truth to some of these negatives, that's for sure. However, what's often overlooked are the positives as well. Probably the biggest one are these top two: cheap labor, and they do jobs that no one wants. Like, I always ask my classes, who out there wants to be a berry picker? And no one ever raises their hand. Who wants to be a migrant farmer who goes in the hot, hot sun from farm to farm picking strawberries or picking oranges or picking apples or whatever? Not very many people like to do that sort of a thing, and that's not usually a career choice of many Americans. So if you want your fruit prices to stay low and not pay $8 because it would cost Americans that much in wages, enjoy the undocumented immigrants doing those jobs. Plus, they bring a lot of good culture and a lot of positive things. We've got a lot of new foods and styles and things in the American culture that immigrants have brought in, both undocumented and documented immigrants. So before you think too negatively about undocumented immigrants, I just urge you to think that there are a lot of positives that those people bring in as well, and make sure you get a lot of the facts before you jump to any conclusions. So. All right, I think that is most of what I wanted to tell you about this unit. Hopefully this wasn't too boring for you. And the next step is to go on and take the online quiz. So take the CL13 quiz.